All right, I'm going to talk you through graphing numbers 1 and 6 on the 4.5 graphing activity. So first of all, number 1, the function is cosine of x plus 2, and the domain that I want to graph it on is negative 2 pi to 2 pi. My amplitude is 1 because my a value, I don't have one out here, so it's 1. My period is 2 pi divided by b. b is just 1 because I don't have a number in front of the x. So 2 pi divided by 1, I get 2 pi. My phase shift is c divided by b. I don't have a c value or a b value, so I don't have a phase shift going on. And my vertical shift is whatever number is out here. So this is going to be up 2. Okay, first of all, I start at 0 anytime that I don't have a phase shift. So no phase shift for this problem, I'm going to start at 0. And now I'm adding on pi over 2 each time. I got pi over 2 from taking my period, which was 2 pi, and dividing it by 4. So period divided by 4 is how I get that number to add on each time. All that does is give me really nice, evenly spaced points on my graph. So now that I have added pi over 2 and gotten these 5 points, I'm going to plug in these numbers to my equation. So I want to see this work here, where you have cosine of 0 plus 2, cosine of pi over 2 plus 2, and so on. You can either evaluate these by thinking about your unit circle, figuring out what the x value is at pi over 2, and then adding 2 on, or you can plug each of these into your calculator. If you're going to plug them in your calculator, make sure that your calculator is in radians, since each of these are radians. You can confirm that by looking at the screen of your calculator and seeing if it says RAD or maybe it says radians on there. So once I plug those in my calculator, I get these numbers. And I can write them as points now over in the last column. To graph, I am keeping in mind that my domain here, so I want you to graph it on negative 2 pi to 2 pi. So I want to make sure that I fit that on my graph. So I chose to go by pi over 2 and skip every other x spot here. So just make sure that whatever you use for your x labels, that it spans most of the graph. I plotted those 5 points, and they were over here. And then I extended my graph this way, since I needed to extend it to negative 2 pi. Couple of things to look at on my graph. First of all, my graph is an oscillating function, which means it goes down and comes back up and down and up. It's oscillating about this red dashed line at 2. The reason it's at 2 is because we moved up 2. My amplitude is just the distance from the highest point to that line. So my amplitude is 1. And 1 period was the first 5 points that we graphed. So this was 1 period. I just extended it further because my domain said to. Okay, example 6. We've got 3 cosine of 2x plus pi, and my domain is from negative pi to pi. My amplitude is 3 because that's what's in the a value spot. My period, 2 pi divided by b, I just get pi. My phase shift, I'm going to take my c value, which is negative pi, and divide it by my b value, which is 2. Let's talk about really quick why that's a negative pi. My equation for cosine or sine looks like this, with bx minus c. So when I do c divided by b, I'm just taking this number and this number. I'm not taking that negative with it. So in this case, for this problem, I didn't have a negative, so I can think of it as 2x minus negative pi. So my c value is negative pi. Vertical shift, I don't have one because I don't have a number added or subtracted on the end here. All right, this time we're going to start at negative pi over 2 since we had a phase shift. In the first example, I started at 0 because there wasn't a phase shift. So starting at negative pi over 2, and I'm going to add pi over 4 to get each of the consecutive values for x. Again, the reason I'm adding pi over 4 is I took my period, which was pi, divided by 4. I plug those values into my function, I get out these y values, and I can write my points. For my x-axis, I'm going to go by pi over 4 so that I can spread out from negative pi to pi. Make sure you're labeling your x and your y-axis. So plotting these 5 points, here's where I end up. So these are those 5 points that I get from the table. That's 1 period. This table is always going to give you 1 period. I then extended it both to the left and the right because my domain told me to graph from negative pi to pi. One more thing to look at on these examples, let's look at our y values here. Clean this up. So 3, 0, negative 3, 0, 3. So I started up here at 3, I went down to 0, and then down to negative 3. And then I went back. So we're always going to have this pattern in our y values where we have repeating. I'm oscillating about this line at y equals 0. And each of the other y values are just an amplitude away. My amplitude is 3. So that's 3 above 0, that's 3 below 0. 3 above 0, 3 below 0. So you should always look for that pattern in your y values since these are oscillating functions.